So before we actually start on the warm-up, you should have a flow chart. Get that flow chart out. Again, this is going to be your lifeline. That flow chart will get you through quadrilaterals the entire way through. Give me one thing that we know about a quadrilateral. Lydia. Okay. So, all four angles must have a, what small word do we want to use? Sum of 360 degrees. So the interior angles, the four interior angles have to add up, have a sum of 360 degrees. What's one other thing that we know about quadrilaterals? Go ahead. Yeah. It is a four-sided, what is it? Polygon. Good. The reason we use polygon is because that's what it is. It's a polygon. Okay? Still with me there. Then we're going to add something to your flow chart. We had an arrow going up. I want you to write on this arrow always. So on the arrow that's going up, I want you to write the word always. And then we had parallelogram. Because the reason we have the word always that's going up is a parallelogram is always a quadrilateral. Has to be. Because a parallelogram is a four-sided polygon. All four angles must have a sum of 360 degrees. Will a quadrilateral always be a parallelogram? No. Does the arrow go down? No. A parallelogram is always a quadrilateral, not the other way around. Everybody still with me? So, now we're going to come back over here. Let's start with the words. So, I asked you to write 5 sentences. I know something about parallelograms. Well, we've already got 2 gimmes. What do we know about parallelograms? Give me some of your sentences. What do we know about parallelograms that we already have up there? Go ahead, Layton.
Parallelogram has, like, weakering, so...
Hold on. Keep thinking, because I want something that's already up here. Taylor.
I know parallelograms have parallel lines.
I want something that's already up here. We're going to come back to that. Owen.
Wait, what?
I want something that's already given up here. Lydia.
I know the opposite sides.
No, I want something that's already given up here.
I know
Yeah. I know a four-sided polygon is also a parallelogram, or could be a parallelogram. What else do we know? Owen.
That all four angles add up to 360.
In a parallelogram. So I know all four angles must have a sum of 360 degrees in a parallelogram. Now let's talk specifics, because that was about quadrilaterals, which a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. Give me something specific about a parallelogram. Let's get some new hands. You all have your notes out. Let's get some new hands. Come on. Carly.
I know parallelograms, opposite sides are parallel.
Very good. Now, I'm going to add a little word here. Both pairs of opposite sides are, and then we've got that funny slanted lines like that, are parallel. Now, the word I'm going to circle here is opposite. What else do we know? So we know both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. What else? Emma. Very good. So again, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. What does congruent mean? Renee? Exactly the same. Again, I'm going to circle opposite. So there's 4 things right there. We need one more. What's the last thing that we need to know about parallelograms? We got both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent.
Do they add up 360?
We've already got that with all four angles must have a sum of 360. Gabriel?
Parallelograms are always quadrilateral.
Yep, they're always quadrilaterals. That's good.
I know that a parallelogram has opposite angles that are parallel,
Not parallel.
congruent.
Very good, congruent. So I'm going to put opposite angles are congruent. And I'm going to circle again opposite. Today, if you know what a parallelogram is, that will help us. Okay, so both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. You need to have this flow chart somewhere. So now I'm going to come over here. Mrs. Armstrong is going to kind of take over and show you how to draw this and label it, because we can do everything based off of what we have on our flow chart.
Yeah, and our labels need to look a certain way. And I walked around the room when I was walking around the room, and I saw some fabulous rock star answers, okay? But we know that we have to label our parallelogram, and the first thing we know is the name of the parallelogram. It's A, B, C, D. Where are we going to put the A, B, C, and D? How are we going to label that on the parallelogram, Leighton?
You're gonna put it on the top left side is gonna be A.
So what I hear you saying is the left side we label A. Let's use our geometric terms. Where are we going to put that? And I might give you a little.
You're gonna put it on the top left angle.
Okay, so what do we call this dot that I put there in geometric
End
terms?
point?
We call it a point. Yeah, the end point. So we're going to put A at one point.
Is there another name that we have for those endpoints of an angle? Starts with a V.
Emma? Vortex? Try again.
There it is.
Vortex. There you go.
Good.
All right. So Leighton got us started. I'm going to finish us off. A, B, C, and D. All right. We also know that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. How are we going to mark that on this parallelogram to make sure that we indicate that on our drawing? Owen?
Okay. Have to put that. Oh, put a triangle, like an arrowhead,
Okay.
on each one, and then on the two, pick two of them, and then they have to be opposite, and you have to put a double arrowhead there.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that on the opposite angle, or the opposite sides, we have to have the same amount of arrows. So one arrow and one arrow tells us that these opposite sides are parallel. 2 arrows and 2 arrows tell us that these opposite sides are parallel.
Yep.
Do we agree? You agree with Owen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what else? How else are we going to mark this so we know it is a parallelogram? Oh, come on, look. We have the information up here. So how are we going to take this information that we know and label our parallelogram? I saw people do this out there. Okay, Izzy?
Yeah, it marks
They have tick marks. What are the tick marks going to tell us?
the opposite sides, like, equal with each other.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that similar to what Owen did, we're going to put 1 tick mark here, 1 tick mark here, so opposite sides are congruent, they're the same length. We'll put 2 tick marks here, 2 tick marks here, so opposite sides are congruent, they're the same length.
You
Okay,
don't have
thank
this.
you.
Please make sure that you put this in your warm-up.
All right, we have one more thing. I'm going to circle it up here. What do we need to know about our angles? We're actually actually gonna look at this last one and then we're gonna read it out loud together, everybody, all right? And then Jess, I'll be with you, okay? On the count of 3, we're all gonna read this because this absolutely lets us know that this is a parallelogram. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I know that both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Okay, what does that mean, Jess?
Pairs of opposite angles are congruent.
The pairs of opposite angles are congruent. How do we label that? How are we going to mark that on our parallelogram? You are absolutely right. What do we need to do to the angles? Say it again.
What mark? Arc.
The arcs, okay? So what I hear you saying is that angle with a vertex D here, an angle with a vertex B there, have a single arc. We know with that single arc, opposite angles are congruent. Angle A and angle C are opposite. We're going to put 2 arcs on each of those to know that they are congruent. They have the same number of arcs. Okay. So as Mr. H said, if you have not added this to your warm-up, go ahead and add that drawing. If we look at this picture, everything that we wrote on this side, maybe except for number 3, we can define this parallelogram by. Okay?
Okay, so once you have that copy down, go ahead and get out your notes, please. Use the rag. It's not that big.
Magic rag.
We are in geometry, still unit 1. Quadrilaterals, I think this is part 3 today, is that right? You should be looking at your notes and saying, was there a part 1, was there a part 2? Yeah, it's part 3. Does everybody have the parallelogram copied down? Okay.
Mr. H,
Yes, ma'am.
just for a second, if you had to organize your notes, we are going to be using the flow chart. So one way you might have this set up is that your flow chart is on one side of your table because we're going to be using it, and then you might put the notes that you're taking, the word notes, okay, to describe our quadrilaterals next to it because we're going to be using both sheets of paper. Okay? So like I'm looking at Carly, may I use you as an example? Carly has a flow chart out and her sheet of paper ready to take notes.
So, notice what we added on the flow chart. We have 2 more boxes leading up to parallelogram. So a rectangle is always a parallelogram. A rhombus is always a parallelogram. Is a parallelogram always a rectangle? No. Is a parallelogram always a rhombus? Sometimes, but not always. Everything that we know about a quadrilateral, everything that we know about a parallelogram still holds true for a rectangle. Everything we know about a quadrilateral, everything we know about a parallelogram still holds true for a rhombus. Okay? So we're going to learn 3 words today. And not learn, but we're going to define them. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a rectangle. What do we think we know about a rectangle? Let's go back to elementary school. What do you know has to happen in a rectangle? Come on, I need some new hands. Everybody's drawn a rectangle. Everybody's seen it. I don't even need math terminology yet. What do we think we need to know about a rectangle? Go ahead, Layton.
Can I point out two things?
Sure.
The first thing I noticed is that rectangle has the word angle in it.
Okay.
So it reminded me that it has 4 angles.
Good. What do those 4 angles have to be in a rectangle?
360.
All 4 are going to be 360. What does each individual angle in a rectangle have to be? Emma, what do you think? They are going to be congruent. So what's that going to make them? If all 4 angles are exactly the same, what? Not parallel. I heard the number. Very good, Cece. Each angle is going to be 90 degrees. That right there tells me that it's a rectangle. That's it. You only need to know one thing extra about a rectangle. So a rectangle is a parallelogram. That means opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent. So it is a parallelogram with 4 congruent angles. That's as geometric as I'm going to make this. And then I'm going to put a little star. A parallelogram with 4 right angles. And we know right angles are 90 degrees. This is pure geometry. This is going to make sure that we know that it has to have 4 right angles, which are 90 degrees. So if I draw a rectangle, I can show that it's a rectangle by the bare minimum amount of drawing. If all you saw was this, you could call it a rectangle. There are 4 right angles, therefore immediately you know that it is a rectangle. Everybody with me? I mean, we've got that. We could also say it's got perpendicular sides. Perpendicular means intersecting to form a right angle. So those sides are perpendicular. Okay? The way that I would say that is adjacent sides are perpendicular. Adjacent meaning the ones next to each other meet at a 90. So, a rectangle. The only thing we need to know about a rectangle, 4 right angles. That's it. Done. Questions on that? Go back to your flowchart. All we need to know, are there other things that I could teach you about the diagonals and, yeah, but we don't care about that right now. All we care about the rectangle is it must have 4 right angles. We know right angles are 90 degrees. Done. That's it. If I asked you to label everything we know about a rectangle, could we do it? So, label rectangle A, B, C, D. So I'm going to give you this shape. Just like your warm-up, I want you to label everything you know about the rectangle. So if you need to go back to your warm-up, there's only one difference between our warm-up and a rectangle. See if you can label it. Go ahead. So take a couple seconds. This should be relatively quick. You can look at your warm-up, you can draw the rectangle, and you can go from there. Label everything we know about the rectangle. Okay. Luke, give me one thing that I can label on my rectangle.
Yes, 490 degrees.
Okay. So, to show that, I can put these boxes. Is that the only way that I can show this is a rectangle? What, instead of these boxes showing that they're right angles, how else can I show that it's a rectangle? What else could I do? Taylor? Oh. So I would put one there. How many would I put down in this corner?
2.
Oh, I put one because they're all congruent. So that would be fine, or the boxes would be fine. Okay? What else do I need? Because I want you to label everything that we know. Owen, give me something else.
Opposite sides are parallel.
Okay? So arrowhead, arrowhead, 2 arrowheads, 2 arrowheads. What else?
I have a question.
Okay?
Why is there 2 arrowheads?
So this one and this one are showing that these sides are parallel. If I put 1 and 1 here, that means all 4 of those sides will be parallel, but these aren't parallel to this side. Those are perpendicular. So I put 2 arrowheads to show that these are the ones that are parallel to each other. Emma. Okay, to show opposite sides are congruent, let's use the word opposite. So these opposite sides are congruent. Anything else? Sir?
Gotta label it.
Yeah, gotta label it. So what am I going to put in each vertex?
A, B,
Nope, not going that way. No, what?
C,
Good.
and then D.
Yeah. As long as you go one way around it, it doesn't matter. Leighton.
One more question.
Okay.
Is it okay if I put the arrows on the bottom up instead of sideways?
Yes. You have to put them sideways. So put them on the line so that that point of the arrow is on the line. Good question. Questions about rectangles? Nothing too hard about it, right? Okay. Next. Rhombus. God, I love that word. Rhombus. So if we come over here, a rhombus is still always a parallelogram, which means opposite sides are parallel. It's a quadrilateral. All 4 angles add up to 360. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. To be a rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Now, here's my question to you. It says opposite sides have to be congruent. If all 4 sides are congruent, will the opposite sides still be congruent?
I'm so confused.
That's all right. So let's draw. It's a parallelogram. So, that's a horrible parallelogram, Mr. H. My goodness. Try again. So, boom, 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 boom. There's my parallelogram. It says, for it to be a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. Do we agree with that? So we're saying this is a parallelogram. But it's saying all 4 sides are congruent. So I'm going to have the same amount of tick marks on each of them. But it's still saying it's a parallelogram. Are my opposite sides congruent? So this side and this side are congruent. Why? Because they're the same. These 2 sides are still congruent. They're opposite. They're the same. Because all 4 sides are exactly the same, the opposite sides have to be the same. Everybody with me? That's all I need to show that it's a rhombus. If I drew you a picture with 4 congruent sides, you would tell me, Mr. H, I know it. It's a rhombus. That's it. So right now, we have 2 other figures that if I said, draw a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, what would you draw me? A rhombus. If I said, draw me a parallelogram with 4 right angles, you draw me a rectangle. If I said, draw me a quadrilateral that opposite sides are parallel, you could draw me a parallelogram, you could draw me a rectangle, or you could draw me a rhombus, because all of those are parallelograms. Everybody still with me? Okay. So go back to your flow chart. Notice how my arrows are going to meet this time. Still going up, which means we still have always. Which means we still have the word always. What do you think the last thing in this portion of our flow chart is going to be? Let's get somebody new. Lydia? A square. Square. A square. A square is always a rectangle. A square is always a rhombus. A square is always a parallelogram. A square is always a quadrilateral. Everything we know right now from all of those other figures are true for a square. We know a square has four angles that have to add up to 360. We know a square has 4 right angles. Oh, Mr. H screwed up. We're going to come back to rhombus. I screwed up. We know a square has opposite angles that are congruent. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite sides are parallel. What didn't I put with rhombus? Because we got to put something with rhombus. What didn't I put over here with rhombus? Take a look at your notes. What we have on the whiteboard versus what we have over here. What do I need to put here, Izzy? Must have 4 congruent sides. Must have 4 congruent sides. Okay, that's a rhombus. So we know a square must have 4 right angles. We know a square must have 4 congruent sides. We have to know everything else about opposite sides congruent, opposite sides parallel. Oh my gosh. But I promise it's not as hard as you think. So I'm going to kind of jump around over here. You're still going down. Here's my last one. We're going to put square, if you want to say it boring, or fun, square. That's how I say it. Right, Connor? Connor, you all right today, buddy?
Yeah.
Just tired?
Yeah.
Yeah? Didn't you sleep well? Did you drink too much coffee yesterday? How many cups?
100.
100. So, did you not sleep or were you just peeing the entire night? Yeah, okay. So, a square. Here's the key word in square. The key word is going to be and. Okay? We know a square is also a rectangle. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 congruent angles. We know a square is also a rhombus, is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. To be a square, it is a parallelogram. I just forgot how to spell parallelogram. Parallelogram. Got it.
Spelling me a
Is that right? Does it look right? Okay. Hey, I got this. I feel pretty good about myself. I just spelled a word correctly. Is a parallelogram with 4 congruent angles. What do we know those angles have to be?
90.
90 degrees. And there's that key word. Has to have 4 congruent angles and 4 congruent sides. Not just one, not just the other. It must have both. Must have both. Questions? So, go back once you copy this down. Actually, let's draw one. Not too hard. Let's draw one. For it to be a square. If I just give you this right here, what is this? If I said, give me the most accurate name of what I've just drawn right now, what is this picture? Ryan, what do you think? Okay, so let's go back here. 4 congruent angles, which have to be 90 degrees, and 4 congruent sides. Do we know anything about the angles? But do we know anything about this picture about the angles? Does it show that? What is it? Right now, the best idea of what we have here is a rhombus. Okay, this is a rhombus. Why? Because the four sides are congruent. What would I have to do to make it a square? What do you think, Elizabeth?
You have to add arrowheads.
Not quite arrowheads. We have sides. What else do we need?
Angles.
Oh, what would I have to do with the angles?
Um,
Make them what?
congruent.
Make them congruent. I can do that with right angles or arcs. This is a square. Both of those have to happen to have a square. So a square must have, oh, there's another class screaming, I like it. Must have four congruent angles and four congruent sides. Quadrilaterals. Here's our flow chart. So if we start off at square, a square can always be a rectangle and a rhombus. A square can always be a parallelogram. A square can always be a quadrilateral. A rectangle is sometimes a square, but not always. The always arrows only go up. Questions?